evening and welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christine Marie, and I'm feeling just so energized for this conversation. I met Benjamin Bear a month or two ago. I found him blindly on LinkedIn, reached out and invited him on the show because I was so intrigued by his about section. And when we met, I was furthermore impressed. And there's a lot of men on the Knowing Show that tune in, check in, and I'm excited for you all to hear from his perspective and from his experience. Current Marine and I guess I guess you're not a veteran yet, but soon to be vet at some point. Who knows how long your career? How long do you think you'll stay in the Corps?
All that's still being worked out right now. I'm not in a position to talk about that at the moment on live, but that's definitely being worked at the moment. Yeah.
We'll see how long until he's a vet, but thank you for your service already, Benjamin. And you also have built a number of brands online while, working in concert. And one of the things that has also stood out to me is how much you have done so much inner work. You've done so much inner work, and you just have this grit and this drive and this motivation that really propels you, where it's a rarity indeed to find someone who will be self-motivated and self-propelled. Normally it's some external factor that moves us forward, but you really have this inner fire and this inner drive. And so I want to talk about how we can create that for ourselves. But ultimately, I'd love to hear your story, which actually lends to this question of tonight's show. If you knew you couldn't fail, how would you live? And so that's how you started, I think. So I'd love to hear your story of how you kind of found yourself here today.
Yeah. It pretty much all started, as early as I can remember. One of the primary motivations I had was I wanted to live a life that would give me a story I was proud to tell, but my whole life was just me figuring out how to do that. I think I hopped on just about every possible journey that I could. I've worked in wildlife rescue, humane society. I've done multiple martial arts. I got involved in politics. I traveled to Bellevue, Washington to meet Al Gore at a summit and be trained to be a climate reality leader at 17. I went to university, and then I got involved in community there, got emergency first response during a typhoon that took out the regional power. And then after college, I had an existential course correction and started becoming training to become a Marine officer, while also then learning about all the abundant ways to make money online, and which was spurred from the COVID-19 pandemic when everybody was living online. So I've been all over the place, and the big kind of benchmark that really set the tone for, okay, I need to get serious about what I want to do. It stemmed from Archetypes, actually. And I always grew up that the first hero's journey I ever read and watched growing up was the story of King Arthur. And just understanding the ways that, it's like the boy born king, but he wasn't ready to become a king yet, and having to learn through the wisdom and sage of the druid Merlin, understanding human politics and dynamics, what corrupts power, and the state that the country used to be in, into how he had to unify people to get there, and just how he chose to live with agency and honor, and paying that forward. That really inspired me as a kid. So I just kind of was like, okay, wealth is consolidating all over the world. There's more and more to go around, but between fewer and fewer hands. My family is struggling financially, and I know that I know that I just want to do something meaningful with my life that has agency and impact. And so when I was studying geopolitics in university, I was learning about all the kind of the scarier things happening behind the scenes geopolitically. And I knew that the person that I wanted to become, I would have to break out of the mold of who I had become comfortable with. So I decided to join the Marines, and I started working on learning how to make income online at the same time to create agency for my family down the line. And I had all the time in the world during the pandemic to start working on that. So how far would you go if you knew you couldn't fail was the first post that went viral. And that kind of just defined my brand, where I'm sharing this ethos with people that resonated with that.
There's so much from what you've shared, even the fact of as a boy being drawn to the King Arthur story. I got to tell you, Benjamin, I'm folks I work with, men in their 40s are trying to figure out how to walk in that kingship and how to be brave enough to step into it, because it's a decision. There's consequence when you're willing. There's a price to pay. When you're willing to draw the sword from the stone, there's responsibility. There's a consequence. You're abdicating the prince, and a lot of times with the prince, there's kind of frivolity that comes with that, and pleasure in perhaps, let's say, the worldly things. Whereas King Arthur, when he really is willing to step into that role, there's so much weight. And I think the direct proportion of the weight is also the direct proportion of the reward. But for so many who have yet to step into that role, all you're seeing is the consequence and the price and the weight. And it's like, oh my gosh. So tell me, how old were you?
I'm 26.
I'm sorry, when you were watching King Arthur.
Oh, I think I must have been 4 or 5.
So how did a 4 or 5-year-old, how did that resonate with you? Did you watch it over the course of your childhood, or was it explained to you? Like, how did that really make that profound of an impact?
I think it's funny when we talk about story, which is the oldest medium of culture that we have. Every single society developed story and culture and an ethos. I underestimated how influential it could be for young children, because I think the King Arthur was, I'm not even kidding, I think that was probably the first animated movie by Disney that I watched.
Yeah.
And I just would rewatch that over and over again, because it was I loved it. And something about the boy's ignorance and his ability to grow up and turn himself into someone who then was able to face malevolence and defend a people and unify and inspire people. Just being a 4 or 5-year-old, seeing that possibility there, I'm pretty sure that shaped a lot more than I really understood at the time. So that's really when it all started.
Well, and it's interesting, I think that's just a prime example of why we need to take every single input with so much of measure. Is this actually kind of putting it on a scale? How much is this actually propelling me onward towards who I want to be in the mission of my life? And how much is it actually getting in the way and maybe even corrupting in and of itself? But then when you're looking at yourself as the parent of a child, how much inputs really do shape our subconscious. Like that was a key and formative input in your life, especially when you're watching it over and over. It's like we all have the songs. I went to go see, I took my darling to see his favorite band for his birthday or for Christmas. And as I was listening to the lyrics leading up to the show, I was like, wow, I know where he got some of his worldviews from this music, from these lyrics. And it was so cool because I got to know him in so much of a better and deeper way. And it was a reminder to me of the profundity of film and art and like it has this ability to really shape our mind. And so how do you today look at your inputs to ensure that you've got wisdom in terms of what you're feeding yourself?
Well, I invested in mentors first and foremost. I saw people who were living the life and sharing their art in a way that resonated with me and with my values, and I decided to invest quite a sum of money into actually being mentored by them. And then after that, it's just about creating more than I consume. I think I listen to a lot of soundtrack and more cinematic score based music. I'm really not caught up in any modern artist in any way. I mean, like I literally could not identify a song on the radio.
I'm right there with you.
And I use music as a vehicle to bring out inspiration and into my work, and effectively as a more of a psyche and spiritual realignment tool every single day. I mean, I listen to music so much of the day, and all of it is usually some instrumental piece that aligns with whatever I'm doing or can bring out inspiration. Like I had a creative flow state earlier today, and it was coming from, funny enough, listening to the it was I forget the name of the show. I haven't watched it myself, but I stumbled upon the soundtrack of a modern King Arthur show, And it was the soundtrack from that, and I ended up having creative flow state. I wrote out an entire YouTube video like that. Like it just happened. And I wasn't watching anything online. I was just in a deep work session. So that's really just how I monitor my input. I'm deliberate with it. I'm just deliberate. And that deliberation is the challenge in of itself. You know?
Yeah,
Because I still find myself doom scrolling every now and then.
I'm so grateful. Honestly, I don't hear many people with the awareness of even the need to be deliberate. You know, it's almost like, okay, be aware and then be deliberate, and then you can change your behavior. But first you got to be aware, oh, there's actually a need here to be intentional, to be deliberate about how I'm living. And there's checks and balances we can put in place to ensure that we're actually living accordingly. But to your point about being deliberate in the first place, you know, man, is it so hard. I have a separate phone for TikTok because I don't want it on my main phone. Like that's how extreme I had to go. Cause I was like, I know that I'm going to do that with everything I heard. You know, I've heard it is so addictive and you just cannot help, you know, falling into that trap and all of that. So I was like, I'm just not even going to play with that. Yeah.
I know people who were changed by TikTok, especially after COVID. And then after college, I know people who they change as a person. You're wondering what changed. And then if you're ever just in the car with them and you hear their feed on TikTok, you're like, oh, it's a no brainer.
Chills.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I got on, I think my friend was showing me something on their Facebook feed and they had just shared with me that they'd been struggling with just feeling angry. And they pulled up their feed, and the second they pulled it up, it was all the bad news. It was like, and they were like, I don't want to feel this way. I hate this information. I hate I hate the political whatever. But it's working. It's actually working. What the feed is doing is doing exactly what it is intending to do, which is causing engagement. You're engaging with that which makes you angry. And so the question is, who do you want to be?
Yeah, and that's where the deliberation is so important, because the moment that I learned that the TikTok algorithm, that the YouTube meta algorithm, it was only feeding me what I chose to watch and what I wanted to see, what naturally engaged me, I realized it was a self-induced problem. It wasn't the algorithm. The algorithm was just measuring my engagement and being like, okay, cool. So he likes this, cool. And then, so if my feed was full of really dismal, terrible stuff, you know, oh Lord, I was like, I'm creating that myself. I'm the one curating this. So
so good. And that is further proof in so many ways. You know, one of the things about these allegories, like you're talking about the story of King Arthur, we are authoring our own life by every decision we make. And you said that at the very beginning. You said you want to live a story that you're proud of. You know, and it's just what a blessing that you started thinking this way at such a young age. I started thinking that way at 28. So I am only like 4 or 5 years old, considering that I woke up at 28. But Benjamin, I'm curious, you know, if you were to encourage folks listening and folks listening, please, I'm reading the chats, and I would love if you guys have any questions for Benjamin. You know, Benjamin, we're going to talk business here pretty soon because you're doing really cool things, and I'm excited to learn from you and share, you know, with our audience and just kind of hear what's happening in the digital space. But before we get there, I just really want to hone in on, you are living in a very unique way, and it's pointedly deliberate, to use your word. But how do you maintain community because you are living so different from the status quo?
Yeah. When you take deliberate action, it doesn't always mean it's going to be the right action. And so there's still a degree of trial and error, but so long as you're able to have the grace and the humility to focus on the signal in that, you won't be caught up in the noise. For example, last year, I had a series of, as you mentioned, when you're really trying to take on a lot of this work, how you can lose a lot and there's a lot of weight and a lot of cost. I was really learning how to step up to a very high responsibility that I had never been exposed to before, with a lot of scrutiny. And it was really demoralizing and challenging while I was learning to step in and to fill that space and to fill that role properly without really any guidance. And during that time, I broke up with my girlfriend. I lost my best friend of 13 years. I fell into debt, developed a spending addiction. And it's one of those moments where it's like, okay, right? you have these pinnacle moments where you just, when you have this deliberation and where you're like, I know I can't stay here and I know who I want to become. And now the gap of where I want to be is so like just bold in my face. I
Mhm.
can see how far from who I want to be and where I am right now. I can see that distance. I can feel it. You really just have, it's a binary decision, and systems and processes and really developing the infrastructure. Blessings to a captain who stepped in
Mm.
and was a mentor to me. Is he really taught me learning and thinking and moving in systems and processes and the importance of that. And when I started to really combine that with deliberation, with
Hmm.
then that archetype that I'm striving for, you
Right.
can pull yourselves out of these depths of despair, these valleys of despair.
Wow.
And you have to go through that. I truly believe that you have to go through that before you know how to maintain it. Because I
Yeah.
was still creating. I launched an LLC. I took out loans. I invested in education and in mentors and in all these different courses. And I just spiraled into debt, taking bets on myself that I didn't even live up to. You know, that
Mm.
I took bets that I gambles that I did not pull off. And you
Mm.
just have these moments where you learn from that and
Yeah.
you find the systems and processes that align with the direction you're going, with the archetype you're going,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
that informs everything else. It really does.
I love this. I've always thought of our ideal. So I use different terminology than you, and I love the archetype terminology.
Yeah.
Uh, I've always thought of, who the question of my ideal. My ideal is effectively the bowling pins. That's the target. That's the goal. That's where I'm heading. And then but let's put archetype there. And to then be able to say, okay, the systems and processes are almost like, so to use the bowling pin analogy, archetypes, bowling pins, systems and processes is one line of the aisle, which is effectively you've got a bumper there to keep your ball from going into the ditch. And then the
Yeah.
other line is your values. Like the how I get there and the values system deeply embedded in me on an ethical, moral level. It's the systems, processes, ethical, moral approach to the accomplishment of that ideal and of that archetype. So I love this. And to your point about systems and processes, I think that it's almost like for those not with a business mind, it's like, okay, the daily habits. What are you
Yeah.
cultivating? What are the practices of your life? And what trajectory are they putting you on towards? Where
Okay.
inevitably will you be 5 years from now if you continue to live every day as you are right now?
Well, truth be told, I don't even what I like about the archetype approach and how that fits into at least how my mind works, because I have I think, a very creative mind when it comes to how I view life. I got some right side of the brain activation happening a lot of the time. I
Yeah.
don't think in terms of even like a 5-year plan. I think, okay, what's it going to take daily to get to that ideal? And
Mm.
then I have a saying that's micro actions paid forward daily move the needle. And
Say that
so
again. Micro act.
micro actions paid forward daily move the needle.
I
And so
love that.
that's a mantra I say to myself every day. And I just identify what are the key. This is what launched the whole infrastructure over tactics newsletter that I started on LinkedIn. It was what are the key actions that you can directly tie to a measurable result in what you're trying to do? And
Mm-hmm.
then how do you find that signal in the noise? And that started with content creation, which led into what I call an ethos funnel
Mm.
when it comes to how you communicate with your audience. And then that led into the systems and processes approach and daily infrastructure to move the needle. And so for me, I got 3 big things every single day that I got to do. It's my
Mm.
daily duties to the Marines that I'm responsible for. It's content creation or something pertaining to that. I'll normally do that in a batch, and I'll take time to go out and actually engage with people that I want to engage with, which is how I reached out to you. And then it's just really it's identifying the next steps forward
Mm,
and in whatever smaller actions that need to happen to support the larger actions.
yeah.
And part of creating content and building a personal brand and then trying to develop the skills necessary and develop the AI automation tech necessary to be able to create behind the scenes for other
Right.
founders and creators, right? Like that all just feeds into this three-pillar approach, which is
Mm,
also macro. My three-pillar approach is agency, impact, and archetype. And that's just that
mm.
ultimately feeds into literally every little action that I take every single day. So
So
that's just the basics.
I love that you say agency. Can you talk a little bit about agency? What does that mean to you? Let's define terms here.
On a bigger picture, in a bigger picture, I think a lot of people try to figure out what they want to do with their life without identifying who they want to be in life. And so once I decided that I knew who I wanted to be and the kind of person I wanted to be, agency was the freedom to be that person every day.
Mm,
Really, that's what agency is to me.
mm,
That I don't need to worry that I don't need to worry about ever needing to be compromised with who I am, with ever needing to that there's a degree of financial abundance to that. Like if my grandmother, for example, they had a change of management at the retirement village that she was at, and she could no longer afford to like just her pension and social security would no longer cover
yeah.
the cost of living there. So she was on borrowed time, and we were having to pull from the will, which
Mm,
distressed her to try to cover costs and sending money in vain. And while I was in debt, all I could do was console her over the phone. And that like kind of that snapped in me a little bit where I was like, I can't afford to wait. You know what
mm,
I'm saying? So there's a degree of I need to know that if anything were to happen with my family, I can cover that. I
yeah.
never need to worry about that kind of financial stress anymore. I no longer need to worry about somebody else telling me how I need to be, who I need to be. I can live in alignment with who I am, pay forward to the causes and the communities that matter to me in my life, and make sure that the people that I care about are looked after. That's agency because someone can't take that away.
Mm. I love this concept of agency. You know, it's I think so often if you want to think of the antithesis of agency, it's so much of the victim mindset that is the pointing the finger and the blaming, and you're the cause for why my life is this way.
Yeah.
And you shared earlier just a number of things that you've struggled with, and a couple folks in the chat were just resonating on the debt side of things. Um,
Yeah.
how does agency respond to honestly shitty life circumstances, just to put it blankly?
Yeah. Um,
Like things outside of your control. Like I know that some of the things like you took a chance on yourself, right? So some of it is self-perpetuated and then that sucks. But for the things that are truly external, how do you account for
I I love that you actually asked this. So I don't mean to ramble, but I'm going to share a brief story really quick to answer this question. And this is really what
Mhm.
developed this for me. In 2020, during COVID, my family had just bought their first house in my
Mm,
life. We've been renting a duplex for 11 years. I moved, I became an RA, I covered room and board. They didn't have to pay for college in that regard anymore because they were helping me up front by wanting me to go to university right after high school. So I took that expense off them, and they were able to use that money and a veteran home loan assistance to be able to secure their first home. It's beautiful Redwood Mountains, Ben Lomond in Santa Cruz County. Um, Pandemic happened. I come back. I visit this brand new home. It's beautiful. CZU Lightning Complex fire happens, and we are forced to evacuate from wildfire. And I remember the day that it was the night before we were watching the fire watch. I said, "Okay, guys, we need to put together these." We were just helpless, right? It's one of those situations where the fire's coming, no one is able to put this thing out. It's mulled over 3 towns by now, leveled them to the ground, scorched, and it's coming our way. What the hell do we do? It was around that time I started reading the meditations by by I can't believe I'm
Marcus
blanking.
Aurelius.
Yeah, thank you. I know
Yeah.
the name. I'm just blanking in the moment. But I started reading the meditations, and I just started focusing. I was like, okay, what can I do right now? I looked at
Yeah.
my family. I asked for a family meeting. I gathered them all, and I was like, we need to get go bags together. We need to we need to just start planning right now. What do we need to take with us by the time that we will evacuate? Because they're not putting out this fire. Just planning for the worst case scenario. They're not putting out this fire. What do we need to put together? And so that conversation launched us actually getting everything together, getting everything ready for the dogs that we had. We had dogs that were traumatized dogs from like Korean meat farms that we rescued. Um, and so anything like rapid movement or displacement will like they were a flight risk. And so it's all about then how do we back plan off of this? We have to leave. And then we were out on the road. We planned an exit route in case traffic got congested, on this one road. And we fled under red skies. It was so dark that it was nighttime. The crickets were out because they thought it was night, but it was
Wow.
blood red sky above and the glow of a sunset that was not the sun. And ash was falling from the sky, and we were out. We were out before most of the community could even get out. We were ready, and we locked down in advance a friend's accessory dwelling unit from work, and we stayed there. And I still had classes, and I couldn't afford to, even if I would be excused for not taking classes and I could re-roll in a further semester, I would still have to pay for that.
Yeah.
So I couldn't afford to just put it off. So I'm driving around in what later became this ash-choked town outside the impact area, where it's so thick, the ash, it's staining everything. You can't see 20 feet in front of you. The sun is a purple dot in the sky.
Dude.
It's not safe to breathe. It's COVID. Every place is shut down. I'm driving around in my inherited from my grandfather, bless his soul, 2000 Toyota Camry, ash stained and crusted, trying to find like a Starbucks or something around that might still have Wi-Fi on the inside so I can park in the parking lot outside, connect to the Wi-Fi from my laptop and hop in classes. And so it was this whole thing of what can I do? Right? Because the bad news is coming. Like I just saw just like that fire that was approaching our family.
Right.
It was like, well, I'm not just gonna sit here and do nothing.
Yeah.
So it's what can I do?
What can I do?
And then how do I prepare for the bad times and make sure that I have systems, processes, I guess, in place to handle that and to make sure that I can still either make critical functions work, and if the critical functions will fail, like there's no shot that I'm able to maintain what I'm doing. What is the most that I can do in that situation that can set the conditions for me to step back up to that when those conditions roll over?
Right.
And so it's total accountability of everything. It's I refuse to be a victim. I've been in that helpless place before, and I just refuse to go back to that.
Sorry, finish.
No, that was it.
I love it's so actionable. Like, what can I do right now?
Yeah.
And in that situation that you're painting, my gosh, I just can't imagine. Like Benny says, it sounds like the wildfires in Cali, the infernos. Like, it's how terrifying.
It was. Yeah, it was over in California.
When you don't have, like, when your caretakers aren't really being the ones to rise up and figure out a solution, and they're panicking and setting the tempo and the tone in the home, and regardless of whether, in anyone's situation, if the people who are supposed to be the ones in charge are not doing the work of taking radical responsibility to do that and setting the stage, then it's for every single one of us. It's not just taking responsibility for the group. It starts with us taking responsibility for ourselves to then be able to, okay, how do I do this for the collective? How do I do this for the whole? And so being able to kind of have that mindset of assuming the responsibility to then step into that which is agency. I think of it as radical responsibility is basically the practice of going inward, of identifying those questions of who do I want to be? How do I want to live? What are the systems and processes? All of those questions. And then agency is the manifestation of that. It's almost like the overflow of the responsibility we have assumed for our life.
Yeah. And where people burn themselves out with that is that they try to assume total authority out of the gate. what being a residential advisor in college taught me was the value of just collaborative leadership, right? When just announcing that you get everybody to acknowledge the problem, no one can deny that it needs to be solved, and you share your ideas for how you think the problem should be solved, and everybody just gets involved. Decisions are made, everybody takes action, everybody's bought into a unified mission. That's how it should start. You build the authority from that place.
Yeah.
But you don't just have an idea and then try to come out of the gate being like, I'm the one in charge. This is what we're doing, because you don't even know.
Yeah.
You're figuring it out too.
So good. There's a couple of folks in the chat saying effectively when you're in that moment of crisis to actually like pray and to take a moment to check in with an ultimate source when it's when it's that type of crisis, So I like that addition.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I believe in living daily life when it comes to spiritual alignment, that ikigai, like we've talked about before, when you have spiritual alignment tied into what you choose to do with your life, whether that for me is pursuing an archetype.
Can you lean into that definition just really fast and then continue to what you were saying?
Yeah. Ikigai, this is, if you are a Japanese person and I'm bastardizing this, I deeply do apologize, but my understanding of it effectively is it's the crossroads between spiritual alignment, vocation, and passion. And that allows, when you live in that way, it allows your daily life to be an act of devotion when it comes to the spiritual side of things, because once again, you're aspiring to who you need to be and who you want to be, or who you feel called to be. It's about who you are before what you're trying to do, right? And so if you live in that, suddenly responding to that crisis practically, for me, like that was just like, God was watching over me. I knew what I had to do. I knew I was good there. This was getting my family prepared for that situation, and them taking the leadership, because they weren't abstinent. Like they were taking leadership too. Like us doing that was an act of devotion and prayer in of itself. We had dependents. We had dogs that were traumatized. We were family holding each other together in the pandemic and the shutdown. It was like, this is an act of devotion. I know we're good with God. We're moving forward. We're getting out of here. We're making sure the family's good. And I think that it's only when you don't have the grounded sense of, am I living in true alignment with who I know I need to become? That is when you start to have that shutdown of, oh God, I need to pray, because I don't think to me, when I felt that in the past, speaking from experience, it was because I realized I wasn't living in alignment with who I knew I needed to be.
Yes. What a good word. Frankly, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. For me, vertical alignment is an actual, it's a principle and a practice. And I think so many of the things in our lives, it's like, okay, is this a principle or an actual daily practice? And how much can I turn these, talk about what values that are on, like, let's say they're on the kind of the left side of the bowling alley. How can I turn that into a process or a system so that my values are actually the very thing keeping me safe and safeguarding me? And I've got them actually living in manifestation and like alive practices. And so with that practice of what that looks like in the actual day-to-day, it's like every morning my mornings are truly sacred. Like I'm now on the West Coast side of time, and I'm 3 hours behind. So all my 8 a.m. meetings, I'm like, I have to reschedule all those because I have to protect my mornings, waking up at 4 or 5 and having that time to make sure that I'm already coming from that place of alignment, so that when tragedy strikes, so that when crisis comes, even in the little quick moments of the day, we're not easily triggered, and we actually are able to give and have overflow from which to pull, rather than pulling from that reservoir that is kind of like the radical responsibility. I can keep that, and then the agency is what I'm giving in the excess and the distribution to others. And so I love that. It's like when I have to pray, because I need to be actually filled up with prayer on my early mornings. That's like, I'm connected to God. And then from that place of kind of maintaining that alignment throughout the day, God and I operate. But then if I'm like, oh, I'm having like one of those, oh shit moments, that's usually actually a sign I'm out of alignment. And then I need to come back into alignment. So I love the nuance of what you just said, because it sounds in one sense like, no, you should always be praying. And it's like, well, no, actually, we're supposed to live victoriously. We're actually supposed to be living and mirroring and modeling the Christ story and the power that comes with that. And that's a very different type of approach to
Yeah.
life than one on my knees groveling for mercy. No, we are actually victorious.
Yeah, and I was blessed at a young age with my family, both my parents being multi-faith chaplains. I got exposed to many, many world religions growing up, and it shaped my idea of really what devotion should be. And so it's exactly what you mentioned when you talk about walking in alignment during the day
Mhm.
and setting that at the beginning of the day. Because in my prayers, I never ask God for anything. I always just I I ground myself and I just try to tap into what I just call the source, this centered place.
Mm.
And I just identify once again this who I know I need to be when it comes to Christ, it's may I walk in alignment with you today.
Yeah.
Right? Like may I walk in alignment with you today. May I honor you through my actions.
Mm.
And then when I know that what I'm setting out to do is in alignment with that, I know that that is like just naturally aligned. And when you engage and you just walk with spirit in that way,
Yeah.
it's not a transaction. You are unifying with this
Mm.
divine.
Mm. Yeah. So good. I want to ask a couple questions that have been posted here in the chat.
Okay.
Brett asks, what is more important, the pursuit of virtue or the pursuit of happiness for the most people possible?
So yeah, that's a nuanced. I got a nuanced answer to that too. I'll try not to ramble on this one. I think my whole life, for most of my life, I've been a I don't want to degrade it by calling it by saying it's a people pleaser. I think wanting to do right by other people is a very noble thing. And I think that
Mm.
just when people are burned, we tend to insult that inclination because of the treachery of other people.
Mm.
Um, but what I had to learn growing up was because of how often my kindness was taken advantage of, it was identifying who would get my goodwill and heart. And I had to have boundaries in place for that. And so when it comes to what actions, should you prioritize virtue or the benefit of the most people, I would say, above all else, I
Mm.
would say virtue, but the reason for that, if you study the seven heavenly virtues, is that you never want to be acting in a way that exploits people. And I think that if you have a virtuous life, you're naturally, if just what you're doing lends to a mission or an outcome that is aligned with who
Mm.
you need to become and the work that you're doing, but it doesn't benefit these people over here, that's fine. Other people will do things that benefit them. They can benefit themselves in a certain way. But you need to make sure that, much like the Marine Corps, when it's mission first, then Marines, you, you never, you never put your Marines on the back burner ever. That is sacrilege,
Mm.
right? Like the Marines in your heart come first, and you make sure that you honor them through making sure that they can execute the mission and that everybody can execute it successfully, because that
Mm.
is what puts them first. And so again, it's this alignment principle where if you find that you are having to make a choice between a virtuous path of becoming and the benefit of others, the questions you need to ask yourself is, are the benefit of these others at my expense? And is that a righteous expense? Much in the way that a single father might take on multiple jobs to make sure that he can cover the income to raise a kid and cover all the costs of that kid. That is definitely his expense, but it is a righteous expense. But if everybody expects you to be a type of way or needs you to be a type of way, but you are degrading and devolving into someone that you know is wrong, that you hate, and that you can't perform really what you know you need to be doing. Let's say that father, he has a bunch of people at work that want him to quit these other jobs and pull this overtime, but overtime won't cover these costs. And then he has friends that want to go out and all these other people, and he's on dates, and these women want him to be different kinds of people, and he's just getting burnt out left and right by the expectations of all these other people. That's not a righteous expense. Like you need to bring it back to, I would say above virtue is mission. Because from mission the virtue comes. And you also identify who it is that you're benefiting in your daily action.
Isaiah says,
That was
well
long-winded.
said. I really appreciate and respect what you're saying about the mission piece. You know, it's okay. Who are you and why are you here? You know, asking like the who, what, why questions. I mean, just getting really basic down to it. And I think that actually, I'm just mindful of, I'm mindful of the time. I want to talk business, but Benjamin, we might just need to do a second conversation if you're up for it.
I'm totally up for it. Yeah.
Do a part two. You know, I'm mindful around how much when you started out, you know, you talked about this question of knowing your archetype and having clarity around that. And I think, you know, if I was to pose a question for every single person listening as kind of honestly homework, what is the archetype you're striving for? What is the archetype that is in the, you know, bowling alley of your pins? What is your aim? And, you know, one of the things that when I turned 30, I wrote my eulogy, and that was such a helpful practice for me to identify, oh, like this is actually who I want to be at the end of my life. And now let me reverse engineer. How am I living today, and where am I not actually taking intentional steps to be on track to meet any one of those objectives that I've put out there? So I'd be curious, you know, for folks to really understand the archetype. I have a different verbiage, so I don't even know what my archetype. I don't know what the archetypes are. Do you have language for that?
Yeah, so back when I was 12, I got exposed to old Welsh wish and druidry because my father was hosting a memorial and a funeral for apparently a Welsh druid who had come to the States to live with their granddaughter, and so he opted to be buried where his family would continue to live, so he could be with his family, and so it was like this very different indigenous worldview from my ancestral homeland that I had never known about because I was raised Methodist Christian. And in that, I started engaging with more of that community and what's called the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, which are more of a Western neo-pagan kind of continuum of that. But that I got introduced to them through the actual like in the actual indigenous connections and network that pointed us in that direction because we are in the States and they had a stateside chapter.
Yeah.
And through that I learned tarot. And tarot not in the sense of divination with cards, but in terms of really studying the literature and what tarot stands for, what it really stood for, which was the reason why it's used for divination isn't because it's cards with a meaning, but when you understand tarot as those are the archetypes, it was the first inspiration for the hero's journey that influenced the bards of old, which bled into then Greek literature and everything else. And when you have across the swords, the clubs, the fool, the apprentice, the magician, all these different archetypes here, they represent different stages or predicaments that you find yourself in your life, and the mobility upon what is a tree, which is the sacred symbol for the druids. The mobility of where you can go will tell you what it like to get here. This is kind of the archetype you need to become. This is the kind of this is what that means. This is where this action will take you. It's a holistic tree of understanding your stage in life and where you are and what you may aspire to become. And so it all started with the fool, the apprentice, the knight, and the king, was just the foundation of the hero's journey. And you see that resembled in the Odyssey. You see that replicated in Harry Potter, in King Arthur, and everything. In every hero's journey, you see those four primary archetypes. And then it laterally, later on in life, you either have the tower, which is the crucible that destroys everything you've built, and you kind of go back to the fool at the beginning of the journey, which is raw potential. and you have every which way you can go, and it's how you decide to build yourself back up from that. You have the sage, which is the wise man, the person who becomes a mentor to others. You have the magician, who transforms the negative into the positive and takes the lessons to create transformation and alchemy in the lives and the community of others. And then you have the rise back to the king, but then with the knowledge from the tower and the wisdom that came from that, they rise to the emperor, which is more of a state of alignment and enlightenment.
Right.
That you achieve more of a spiritual degree of leadership. And so those are the archetypes I started working with at a young age. When there was a druid explaining this to me out in the woods. And I was learning. I was like, okay, you know?
Tell me more. I'm 12.
Yeah. It was
Tell me,
awesome.
really quick question. What is your relationship like with your father?
Oh, we're good. Yeah. So yeah, we're good. My father is such a he's such a good role model. So I was once again, I was blessed. Despite everything that happened outside the family, I was blessed with a good family. So my mother's kind of the more of the fire. She was a sergeant in the army. First woman to be a combat journalist for the Pentagon, actually. And she went through a lot of stuff. She's got a lot of fire and kick to her. And my father is the counter to that, where he's much more like holistic, grounded, stable. He can just walk in stride with chaos, identify what needs to happen. He absolves unnecessary stress by with comedy and situational comedy, pointing out that we're stressing over nothing. Um, and he's also a deep, deep scholar, especially on the spiritual side of things. And he was the first one in the family to move to the interfaith or multi-faith chaplaincy after the church. And he was the one that exposed me to all these world religions. So at 9, he was taking me to like Tibetan Buddhist monasteries, and I was sitting down and having dinner with Sikhs and reading the Quran and also studying the Bible and the parallels of Christ as a revolutionary, and what the Son of God meant to the Romans. And and all these different levels that really kind of foster this deeper holistic way of thinking about the world. And the biggest thing he did for me was putting me in a Zen Buddhist not a retreat. It's pretty much it wasn't a monastery. It was pretty much just a society. Every Sunday I would go and I'd practice Zen Buddhism because I had Tourette's. And I would just have to literally be there, and I would have to practice Zen Buddhism for an hour every Sunday and then engage with the community. And that mindfulness and learning to have total awareness of oneself, one's mind, the body, you start to identify that while our brain creates our thoughts, what are thoughts, you know? And so you
Yeah.
just kind of, you don't try to control your brain, but the thoughts come and you're like, okay, you acknowledge it, you just let it pass like a river. And you become more aware of your subconscious mind and your body, and you start to have this deep inane intuition with yourself. And he had been practicing that for decades, because what changed his life is he went and lived at a monastery in South America. And so when he shared that with me, that pretty much became a foundational like tree trunk for
Yeah.
everything else, because I had the mindfulness and the awareness to kind of glean everything that I've been sharing in this call, essentially. That's when deliberation over reactivity really formed for me at age 10, with me overcoming my Tourette's, because what I experienced was the impossible to me at the time, where the Tourette's, that these tics, they were completely uncontrollable. There was no warning, no signal, no nothing. It would just happen.
Gosh.
I get bullied ruthlessly for it. I was
Oh,
ostracized, and I started to be able to, in meditation, feel when they were coming, because when you're only sitting with yourself and your own mind, and you're just thinking constantly, and everybody's looking over at you, they don't care, because they're just like, oh, that's just noise over there. I'm going to focus on my breath. It's like they don't care, and you have to sit with that. And I started to become aware of what was something sporadic became I could feel an urge coming. and I could start to be aware of when the tics were coming. And once I gathered awareness of that, I could then basically talk to my own body and mind and be like,
this is
no,
so
no,
cool, Benjamin. My
no,
God.
no.
It's a whole
Yeah.
different it's a whole different kind of perspective on what it means to be aware, you know?
Yeah.
Like literally through something so physical, like my body is doing something that I'm not in control of, and learning how to be in control of your body.
Agency.
Yes.
Right. And so that early awareness really just set the stage for everything. It was like, okay, I could literally tell my Tourette's to stop. I'd be like, no, we're not doing that right now. You know, and then I just overcame it. I outgrew it. It went away. Because you know, and forget where we were at the beginning of that ramble. But,
gosh, well, I just want to highlight, there's so much benefit in learning different practices and even just learning the different principles, right? There's so much to offer. And I think that I know so many people who have grown up in a very black and white, dogmatic, religious framework.
Yes.
When they start meeting other people in their 20s, 30s, they didn't have any exposure outside of their little four walls. They have these encounters with people who are good, wonderful humans, actually have very good practices that they hold in a maybe a counter-religious or even a non-religious setting. And then they're like completely thrown for a loop, like what is true, rather than recognizing that there's kind of think of it as like little t truth and capital T truths, like the moral structure of the universe versus like, no, there's a lot of benefit and a lot of gain in understanding countercultural, counter-religious, like just expanding our mind and expanding.
Uncle Iro.
Your point of awareness. Yeah. So I really appreciate that. And I love the application in terms of the physical body on the meditation piece. I mean, gosh, I cannot imagine having Tourette's. That just, I can't, that was probably hellish.
It was a point of my life.
It's funny. My sister, her husband, just one heck of a guy, just so wonderful. He was killed at 26, and when he was 7, 8, 9, 10, I think his eyes were pretty bad. So they had to do like corrective eye work, and so he had to wear a patch over one eye, and he had these thick glasses. And then at one point they broke, and he had tape in the middle of them. Ruthlessly bullied.
Oh my God!
But that taught him a deep empathy, and he was one of the most brilliant, beautiful, wonderful men. But he had this ability to shine the light on everybody else because he had come from that place of like, oh man, I know what it is to suffer in a formative time in life of being the recipient of the bully. And in one sense, that is the victim, right? In so many ways, it's like you kind of are powerless if you're going to try to operate in love at such a young age. And so I don't know, I love that perspective of how you were shaped, and how you learned how to control your body. And man, isn't the ability to control our mind one of the most important things, much less so our bodies.
Yeah, it all stems from mindfulness and awareness. It really does. And I can tell that you know what I'm talking about. It just when I tune into your show, I hear you talk in much of the content that you publish, and even in the conversation now, I know that this is something that you're well aware of. It's that mindfulness and that alignment. It's when you have those two ingredients together, there's not much you can't do. Doesn't mean it's not gonna suck along the way.
Yeah. Doesn't mean it'll be nice.
No. But you maintain, you keep the Northern Star.
Right. Yeah. I love it. DJ says you have to know the enemy in order to defeat the enemy. And in one sense, it's interesting. And DJ, I might be taking this out of context, and I'm sorry I didn't read your previous chat, but I think that there is something in terms of knowing my mission, knowing who I am, and also what am I going up against? Actually understanding that. There's a book by Patrick Bet-David that I have friends who are not a fan, and I love the guy. I went to one of his events and just read his book called Choose Your Enemies Wisely. And I like the concept of like find a foe that challenges you in the best way. Like he uses the example of Tom Brady, where it was like, no way at 40 years old, Tom Brady can be, still the star quarterback. And he was like,
Yeah.
I'm going to show you. And I think that's an example of like choosing your enemies wisely. Like find the DJ, your nemesis, and really be motivated. Like find the internal motivation, but also you can choose something external too, but then you channel it inward so that you're constantly motivated from within. And so obviously there's a lot here. Any final parting words before we wrap up?
Really? Just tailing off of what you said, two pieces of wisdom that two different mentors of mine have given me was, one of them said that once you know who you want to be, that is your competition.
Yeah.
And so that ties into that externalizing and then internalizing the enemy. And the other one said that if I just, it was, if one man can do it, so can I. And if you just carry those two philosophies in your heart and you're able to just identify who it is you want to be, everything else falls into place, because all you can do after that is take deliberate action.
Yeah.
There's nothing else to do but that.
So good. Thank you so much for your time, Benjamin. I really respect the way that you're living. I really do. And I'm grateful for you and for you joining tonight. Y'all, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We will be live again tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, as we move through. Gosh, I think it's lesson 73. It'll be the 73rd day of the year tomorrow. So hang out with us tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. and we'll go through A Course in Miracles. Thank you so much, Benjamin. I'm grateful for you, my friend.
Of course. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you tomorrow.